Tua or Pat Mahomes?
Tua or Patrick Mahomes? Obviously, like I'm gonna go with 1.5 as the strongest arm, but as far as accuracy wise, I'm going with Tua all day.
So which one would you rather have? The deep ball where you got to scramble around the field to try to go find it? Or do you want that accuracy to hit you right in the bread basket on the run?
I want it to hit me right in the bread basket, just like I did in the Buffalo Bills game, and take it 70. And the rest is history.
I know this sounds absolutely batshit insane, but Tyreek Hill is right. He's not right about everything he said in that fateful podcast last month, obviously, but he's right about some things. For instance, primarily, he's right that he and Tua Tagovailoa are actually a perfect fit together. And if you don't believe me, well, then don't trust me. Trust the data, and then trust all the film that I'm going to lay out here, because that's really all the evidence you need. Let's start with that data. Contrary to popular belief that the Dolphins are just some dink and dunk offense while the Chiefs throw bombs on every single play and stretch the field whenever possible, they're actually a lot more similar than you think. The average depth of target for all Patrick Mahomes throws last season was at 8.1 yards past the line of scrimmage, while the average depth for all of Tua's throws was nearly identical at 8 yards flat. Looking at their routes targeted charts, Tua also ironically has a much higher percentage of go routes targeted at 15.2% of his throws being go routes versus 9.8% for Mahomes respectively, and he also threw a higher percentage of deep posts as well at 3.6% compared to 2.9%. Mahomes did have him beat on deeper outbreaking routes, of course, because you need to have a really strong arm to consistently even attempt those types of throws, but on the whole, it's pretty easy to see that Tua and Mahomes were similarly aggressive down the field in terms of total attempts. They just split those attempts differently among separate preferred routes. When looking at Tyreek Hill specifically, he too is also commonly seen as some deep ball merchant whose one role is to beat defenses deep and rip off chunk plays, which obviously he can still do, but to be honest, last year in Kansas City, defenses were overplaying the deep ball so much against Mahomes and the rest of the KC offense that they really started to use Hill as more of a possession receiver instead, and he would get most, if not all, of his explosive play opportunities with yards after the catch. In fact, he only had 8 targets on go routes all season long, and he only actually caught one of them. He also only had 2 catches on high sail routes all year long, he caught a single seam route for 17 yards, and he only had 1 catch on a corner post the entire year, which of course went for a 44-yard touchdown, because of course it did. He really did not have that many catches deep down the field, but meanwhile 92 of his receptions, 79% of his total catches by the way, were either hitch routes, crossing routes, stick routes, screens, slants, short sevens, or return routes. All of those are 10 yards or less past the line of scrimmage, and they made up the vast majority of his opportunities to get the ball in his hands. So when people talk about Hill going to Miami and now being quote-unquote doomed to just catching slants and hitches and screens all day to accommodate his new quarterback, well, that's really nothing new for him. He's used to that type of role, and he genuinely enjoys it. But beyond Tyreek and what he brings to the table, we still gotta talk about Tua and what he also does well, because he's the most important factor here. I have been absolutely fascinated by him for years now and how fans and media perceive him, relative to the rest of the league, of course. So much so that I'm actually going to go see him play live and in person down in Miami in week 3 of this year against the Bills, so that I can finally get a better idea of how good he really is. Because sometimes, at least for me, I just need to see somebody play live. And by the way, if you're also going to that game and you want to hang out and tailgate or grab a beer in the stadium, anything like that, please hit me up on Twitter and we'll figure that out. Or if you want to go to that game, but you haven't got your tickets yet and you want to save a little bit of money on them, you can get $20 off of those tickets to that game by using SeatGeek, which is the ticketing partner of this channel, of course. I also use SeatGeek to get tickets to the Middle Tennessee vs. Miami Hurricanes game the day before that Dolphins game too, just to kind of do some pre-draft scouting work on Tyler Van Dyke while I'm in town. So if you're planning on going to either of those games, don't hesitate to come say hi. Also, I'm going to be going to all of these games that I'm putting on screen right now as well, because I went ham on SeatGeek, not gonna lie. Rams versus Bills, Texas versus Bama that same weekend, Bucks versus Cowboys the day after that, Bucks versus Steelers in October, Lions versus Jets in December, maybe Seahawks versus Broncos week 1 as well, and a bunch more that I still haven't scheduled yet, but just follow my Twitter. I'll keep you updated about where I'm going. But anyway, again, if you want to go to any of those games that I'm traveling to this season, you can get a $20 discount on tickets to any of those games using the link in the description below on SeatGeek. And some of the tickets to these games are literally less than $20 each, so I guess you just go basically for free, or at least close to it. I don't really know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but anyway, back to the topic at hand, Tua Tagovailoa and his fit with Tyreek Hill, Mike McDaniel, and yes, even Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki. When looking at the Dolphins' offense last year, on the few snaps that Tua was able to throw without being nearly decapitated by his own terrible offensive line, he showed himself to be good at 3 particular types of throws. Number 1, boundary side fades. Number 2, intermediate and deep crossing routes. And number 3, the quick passes that are either RPOs or quick throws off a play action that take advantage of the middle of the field being opened up by run fakes. Let's start with those fades. I want to differentiate between go balls to the field side and go balls to the boundary side. Goes and fades to the field side, or wide side as some call it, are much harder to throw when the ball is spotted from the far hash, because obviously it takes a lot more arm strength to be able to cover that extra distance and still leave the ball outside and over the shoulder of the receiver where they and only they can get it. Tua barely even attempts to throw them to the field side for the most part, because even he himself knows that it's not the best club that he has in his bag, and even on the few attempts where he has tried it, he mostly has been either short or inside with his ball placement, just enough to allow a DB to still make a play on it. It's not a noticeable deficiency, of course, because for some people, a go ball is a go ball, but not all go balls are created equal in difficulty, and he just doesn't quite have the arm to really elevate and nail that throw to the field side consistently. However, when Tua is throwing fades to slot receivers or fades to the boundary side, some call that the short side of the field, where space is more condensed and it's less about arm talent and more just about pure accuracy and touch, he is fantastic on that particular throw. The ball is almost always elevated, it's outside, he's routinely taking advantage of the size differences that he's had with receivers like Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, and overall, whenever he's had these types of one-on-ones down the boundary, he could still routinely hit them for big gains. I don't really see that changing at all now that Tyreek is in town either. Secondly, let's talk about those intermediate and deep crossing routes as well. Tua was very, very comfortable throwing those, even from really tight pockets sometimes, because again, hitting a throw on a high cross, or an over route, or a through route, anything in that general family, throwing those routes is more about touch, timing, and anticipation than it is just about arm strength. You have to layer the ball over the linebackers, and often underneath the safeties too, and it has to be just out in front of the receiver where only they can reach it with their particular leverage. Some quarterbacks just aren't very good at that placement, but Tua is, and it doesn't matter if he's throwing it to a big body or a small body, as soon as that deep cross gets to the second window around the far hash or the numbers, he can usually drop that ball right in there and have a ton of success. Lastly, of course, we also have to acknowledge his proficiency with working with the quick passing game and the RPO game too. It's become a little bit of a meme over the last year that Tua is quote-unquote just an RPO quarterback, or that he's only good with play action, but I want to talk about the actual skill set that he has when executing these types of throws, because there is an element of difficulty to it that a lot of people don't acknowledge. When you watch the Dolphins work the quick passing game off play action, they often have Tua throw against the grain of the run fake, which defenses largely don't expect, but it still works because his feet are so quick and his release is so quick that he can flip his hips and fire a throw into a window that is facing the opposite way from that run fake. Let's use this play against Atlanta as an example, because I think it's a great way to illustrate what I'm talking about. The Falcons are in a nickel package against 12 personnel on 1st and 10, and there's normally no way in hell they're going to risk playing a too high safety structure into that look. They're already at a size disadvantage in the box just based on personnel matchups, so it's highly likely that they'll play some type of single high call and max out the run fit with as many bodies as possible. And the Dolphins can make a pretty good educated guess here as well that that's what the Falcons will do, because it's what most defenses would do. So knowing that likelihood, they call a glance route to Mike Gesicki off a play action fake with another fake bubble screen on the backside to occupy these two DBs out in no man's land. Now, I know this does look like a run-pass option play because, again, you have the bubble and the run action and all that, but it's really not. If it were actually an RPO, A, you would not see these Dolphins receivers jogging through their assignment on the backside. B, Tua likely would have actually thrown that bubble because he had 2-on-2 in space, and RPO rule number 1 is that if you get even numbers to the bubble, you throw the bubble. And C, if it were an actual RPO, they would have, tried to block the run a little bit and not just let 2 defenders fly downhill into the C gap. So yeah, this was play action all the way. They were trying to suck up those linebackers. It was not an RPO. But anyway, that's besides the point. The reason why I bring up Tua's ability to quickly throw against the grain of the run fake is you have to remember that he's a lefty. All of the preparation that defenses put in throughout the week preparing for Miami is with Tua being a left-handed quarterback in mind. So if a run fake is going across Tua's face from his right, unlike right-handed quarterbacks, he can't then just immediately set his feet and fire that glance route. He has to pull his front leg through, reset his platform, and then fire the ball in the exact same time frame that a right-handed quarterback would have to execute that same throw. It's a much harder mechanical process for a quarterback to do, which is why most defenses don't expect the Dolphins to call glance routes that originate from, for lack of a better word, behind Tua's back during a run fake, because again, it's harder footwork for a quarterback to do. But because Tua's feet are so quick and he's trained himself how to execute this throw at the same pace of a right-handed quarterback, Miami still has the freedom to call these types of plays from that alignment, in addition to also reaping the benefits that come from Tua being left-handed. For instance, short 7 routes to the boundary side to his left are super easy for Tua compared to a right-handed quarterback because his shoulders and feet are already facing that direction during his drop. Defensive backs on that side of the field have no idea whether he's throwing a glance, a fade, a short 7, so they're typically really late to break on that route, and it's just free yardage for Tua. Meanwhile, a right-handed quarterback on that same throw would have to be peeking at it early over his shoulder and have to take an extra step to open up his hips to that side, which would then give the DB more time to react to it. There's obviously benefits and challenges for certain types of throws for both left-handed and right-handed quarterbacks, but Tua has done a fantastic job of mitigating his challenges with his footwork while still having the benefits. So overall, to tie this whole thing together in the end, looking at how this Dolphins offense is going to be structured now that Tyreek is in the building, I think there are some elements that are going to be the exact same to how he was used in Kansas City, and obviously there are some things that will be different. Most notably, obviously, his couple hundred yards last year that came from just scramble drills with Mahomes where Patrick was able to escape and make some insane throw out of nowhere. Yeah, those yards probably won't be there with Tua. That's not really his style as a passer, but all of the other stuff, the slants, the short 7s, the screens, the end arounds, the yak opportunities for days, all of that is still going to be the same, and probably even more heavily leaned on than it ever was for Hill and KC. The fades to the boundary that we talked about to Mike Gesicki and now Eric Ezekama, their new rookie receiver, those are still going to be the same too, and probably even more plentiful. Even the deep crosses both to Hill and to Jalen Waddle are also not going anywhere, and that's still one of his best throws. But most importantly of all, at the end of the day, the ability for Tua to operate with quickness and energy at a relentless no-huddle pace, plus a diverse and fascinating run game to help him out under Mike McDaniel, all of that is still going to be the centerpiece of the Miami offense this year. The good is going to stay good, and the bad, at least on paper, should be better, because for the first time in Tua's career in Miami, the offense around Tua, both in personnel and with scheme, it finally fits what he does best. Now, all of that being said, do I think that Tyreek Hill will be as productive in Miami as he was in Kansas City? I mean, maybe. It is possible, but that production would come from other methods than he typically produced in Kansas City. He might get 200 less yards per year from, his quarterback running around and making something out of nothing and flicking the ball 50 yards down the field. That's probably not going to happen in Miami with Tua. But he might replace that production with other stuff, like more yards after catch opportunities, kind of getting involved in the run game, which is really counted as the pass game if we're using tap passes, the screen game, pretty much all the stuff they like to do with RPOs and getting the ball out quickly. I do think that Tyreek ultimately can replace his potential loss of deep ball production with more yards after catch. And to be perfectly honest, that is okay. There's a lot of different ways to get things done in the NFL, and ultimately Tua is a good enough quarterback to get things done. Is he Patrick Mahomes? No, obviously not. But do you know who is as good as Patrick Mahomes? Basically nobody. I think it is wildly unfair to hold Tua to the Mahomes standard because they're not the same type of quarterback, like at all. They have different skill sets, they have different physical abilities, they have different everything. They're not the same. And so I think trying to compare Tyreek's production to what he did in Kansas City and trying to compare Tua's production to Pat Mahomes, it's just not fair to the kid. So maybe let's not saddle him with a whole bunch of pressure that he doesn't need right now because he's not literally one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever enter the league. When all is said and done, Tua is fine. The Dolphins are fine. They're going to be a good team. They're going to make a playoff run. And I think the Dolphins fans are going to be very happy because looking at the last 2 decades of their franchise history, making the playoffs and being entertaining in January would be one hell of a change of pace. Will they win the Super Bowl this year? It's tough to say, but they'll at least be a threat. And at least for now, I think Dolphins fans would be ecstatic just being a threat. Keyword for now.